What's up, guys? My name is Fari, and today we have day 100 of this road to 100 videos each and every single day. I am super excited. Like this whole journey started off of the bat of me saying that I was just gonna post for 30 days, and now it's day 100 of posting each and every single day. And I think the moats that I've been able to, build throughout these 100 days is ultimately something that has, 10x my output because now I've been focusing a lot more solely on just focusing on execution, and through this execution we've ultimately been able to compound the videos that we've been building into day 100. So what is next for this day 100? Well, when I thought about what the next phase for day 100 would be, the question that popped up in my mind was the same question that popped up when I did 30 videos. Who is the guy, or who remembers the person that does 30 days and quits? And I think I'm going to take a bit of that same philosophy and take it to this, to say, hey, who has done, who remembers the person that has done 100 days and has ultimately, stopped after that? So now I'm, gonna kick it up a notch and do one full year of, building each and every single day. So that means now, from now on, from now until like we reach 365 or so, I'm ultimately just going to be pushing myself to keep on building each and every single day. So I'm probably going to ditch the whole, style format of me having this talk and then me going over it. I think the most important mode right now is ultimately showing what it is that I'm building on a day to day, because that is ultimately going to force that, that building mode to ultimately show you guys what ultimately comes from Killer Chaos OS, and ultimately, not just how I'm thinking about this, but now how I'm executing in terms of Killer Chaos OS. So each and every single day, I'm just gonna be pushing myself, to ultimately build something new and show it to you guys, so that we're just building, actively building and executing as well. So it's not just building the thinking mode, but also just focusing and leaning a lot more into the execution mode, which is building Killer Chaos OS and using the frameworks and mental models that we've built throughout these 100 days to ultimately use this to govern how we're going to be able to build these systems that we're going to be building from now on. And I'm super excited. Like, if there's one thing that I'm super excited about, is ultimately just building that forcing function of just building each and every single day. And I think this, mode of just building each and every single day is going to be super difficult, because when I started 100%, I had days where I didn't feel, 100% in terms of, filming the daily videos. I didn't feel, great most of the time, but some of the days I felt super pumped and energetic. There were some days where I felt, like I wanted to, just stop it and just not continue, at all. And that was around day 50 to day 60 when it just became a lot. But ultimately, I told myself that, I am going to get to day 100 no matter the cost, because, I want to basically earn my seat at the table. The one day, they're going to ask, or let's say I get in contact with my heroes and then they ask me, so what great thing did you, or were you able to accomplish that made you deserve a seat there? And I think it's ultimately, building each and every single day for 365 days. I know it's super, super, difficult, and it's one of those goals that you ultimately set right now, and you're like, dang, man, this is so hard. This is so difficult. But I know that we're ultimately gonna be able to reach it, and ultimately make sure that, the person that you become from day 0 to day 365 is completely different. And just documenting slash building each and every single day, I think is going to be unmatched leverage going into the future. So now I'm going to just be, going super deep in the trenches, posting each and every single day in terms of the builds that we're making. Of course, the first couple of videos, I'll just, be kind of getting accustomed to the new format in terms of, what I'm going for, the style that I'm going for as well, in terms of, making it in a way that is sustainable. And I know that's only going to come through the systems of documentation, how we're actively, building out the systems in terms of how we're going to post a video each and every single day, and also just making them as valuable as possible. If there's anything, from, my younger version of myself till now that has always been consistent, it's trying to do the things things that no one else does, because I know that that is where the leverage lies. And if doing 100 days was insane enough in my mind at the time, what is 365 days? I know there are going to be times where I'm not going to feel like doing it. I'm not going to be at 100%, but I think, just documenting it raw, authentic, and, just whipping out the camera and just pressing record is ultimately going to be the modes that's going to be a forcing function to the level of execution that I want to be playing at, in a year's time from now. And this means 265, or 266, or whatever the case may be, days of just uploading each and every single day. Of course, there may be days where I may probably skip, hopefully not, but I'm just gonna force myself to, ultimately record each and every single day, so that we're ultimately able to build the mode of execution like I spoke about, because these past 100 days have been pretty interesting. Gonna keep the guests on. I think that is ultimately gonna be super valuable to have people on sharing their journeys, sharing their experience, and most importantly, just learning off of them as well, and also bringing that to this channel and just documenting everything to show people that, hey, you know what, this is what I've been able to do throughout this whole entire journey, and also incorporate storytelling, because I think one of the most important modes as well is ultimately building this storytelling aspect of it, in terms of how we're gonna build a story around from day 100 to day 365, and also just make sure that this ultimately compounds into other different opportunities if they may come, but ultimately creating a lot of value for the people that are watching these videos, and just showing what it is that I'm building on a day-to-day, and transforming into the person that is unrecognizable to myself after day 365. And 100% it's going to be difficult. I know for a fact it's going to be probably one of the most difficult things that I have done, and I'm going to look at it from a year's time from now and be like laughing, because I realized that it wasn't as difficult as it seems, because now I've built that execution mode of just posting each and every single day, and ultimately sharing as much value as I possibly can. Even if we get 0 views or 1 to 2 views a month, I don't care. I think the most important thing is ultimately to share value and build that compounding leverage, which is through these videos and showing what it is that I'm building on a day-to-day basis, because through this I'm ultimately going to be able to bring the grand vision of Killer Chaos OS, and understanding that there's specific times, different phases for different stages, that you need to just focus on specific things. And I want to make sure that I'm also using this somewhat as a platform to document for myself into the future, because looking back on it, I'm going to be super amazed in terms of how far I've been able to come. And if I'm able to just share that to someone, or even inspire someone in terms of the sheer level of execution that it's ultimately going to take to reach a new level, then by all means I am going to do it, because one of the most important things for me at least is ultimately being of use, being of value, and creating value. That value creation cycle is something that I'm super obsessed about, because if I'm just able to build and show this obsession in terms of building and making it easily digestible, in a sense that people understand what it is that I'm building, and making sure that for myself that I'm also keeping myself accountable in terms of executing each and every single day. And also, just to shout out Ryan Clogg, I started these videos solely because of him, so I need to personally just give a shout out to him. He's the reason why I took the route of saying I'm gonna do 30 days like he did, and then take it up to 100, and we even had him on day 54, I think, or 56, somewhere around that. And that was a very cool experience. And I know that the network as well that we're ultimately going to be able to build through these daily videos is ultimately going to be of so much tremendous value to you guys as well. So now it's time to just put on that execution hat. And yeah, I just want to say thank you to everyone that's been watching these past 100 days. 365 or 265 more to go. I'm super excited. It's going to be a lot of trial and error, so many things I'm going to be testing out, but I think the most important modes that are going to be developed is basically the thinking OS, basically like I always say in my videos, how we log decisions and solve problems, and also the grit that it takes to ultimately just document each and every single day, and also the execution mode, how we're basically able to execute on a day-to-day basis, because I know that that is going to funnel into so many different facets within my life, and ultimately just being mission orientated over ego, like I spoke about a couple days ago, to focus solely on the mission, to say, hey, sometimes we'll ultimately need to pivot, and that pivot doesn't mean we've ultimately lost, but it's ultimately taking the strategic pivot in order to reach and to the main goal that we're ultimately striving for. And that means a lot of sacrifices, and I will make sure to also share these as well, because this is not only just a documentation of what it is that I'm building, but it's also documentation and proof to myself that I am able to do it. And if I can rewatch these videos, like I'm always saying, in 10 years and be super proud of myself, I think that would be something that will be worth pushing for. And if by all means we get to the grand vision of Killer Chaos OS, where we're ultimately inspiring millions of people and also redefining industries, then we're ultimately able to get to the grand vision for it. Right now, Killer Chaos OS may take a slight back burner for now, but ultimately the main mission is ultimately to build what it is that we're building on a day-to-day basis, and just show that, and just show the level of execution and the level of detail, so that we're ultimately just sharpening my tool set as well, because I know that that is only going to translate into the team as well. And I'm super excited. It's going to be super difficult, I know for a fact, but ultimately each and every single day I'm just going to make sure to keep showing up. It's probably the hardest thing that I've done in my lifetime, by the looks of it right now, but ultimately I know that each and every single day I'm going to try again, and most importantly show up each and every single day. Because if I show up in these daily videos, then I'm also able to show up for myself and also for the clients that we'll be working with into the future. And that feeling is ultimately unmatched, to know that we're creating so much value for our clients, and also for me as well, that we're able to output 10x value than what we're ultimately doing right now. And I know that into the future it'll be a much bigger play, but ultimately in order to get there, we need to build the positive compounding leverage that ultimately gets there. And I know that through these videos we're ultimately going to be able to get there. So I'm super excited. I'll try to keep it not too long, not too short, but ultimately just to share what it is that I'm thinking in terms of kicking it up to 365. So from day 0 to 365, we're not even halfway yet, and I know it's going to be one of the most difficult challenges, but ultimately I know and I believe 1000% that we're gonna get there. Just that sheer level of obsession I know is ultimately gonna get us there, and discipline as well. And ultimately focusing a lot more on just being disciplined, I think that we're ultimately gonna build the grand vision for what it is that is gonna come from these daily videos. So I'm super excited. I'm super excited in terms of the network that we're gonna gain, and also the value that we're ultimately also gonna output as well, and most importantly the millions of people that we're probably going to inspire. Even if it's just one person that we inspire through these daily videos, I know that that is worth doing and worth creating value. So into the future, it's going to be super difficult, but I'm super excited to see where we will be in a year from now, and ultimately seeing where we're going to be. So it's 265 from now. Day 100, it's been pretty fun, I'm not gonna lie to you, but now we're gonna take it to a whole new level. So that means also focusing less on the days, to not focus on, hey, this is day 1, this is day 2, this is day 3, but ultimately what value are we outputting on a day-to-day basis. I think that is the way to have a long-term vision on it, to say, hey, how can we actively provide as much value today and the next day and the day after that, and constantly show up. Some days may not be as valuable as the day before, but ultimately we're ultimately just going to keep on pushing the needle forward in terms of what it is that we're going to be building in terms of Killer Chaos OS. And also for me as well, Killer Chaos OS being the mental models and frameworks that we've built, the lessons, and then ultimately make sure that we're going to be building this and scaling it up into the future, and just making sure that each and every single day that execution mode and that thinking OS mode is also built, in order to make sure that we're building right and also executing right, and thinking about solutions and ways to solve problems in the way that we should, And I know that one day we will get closer to that grand vision. It just takes, a very long time, but ultimately I know that, patience is the name of the game, and I know that we're going to get there. So if you guys watched the video till this far, I want to say thank you for, supporting, the past 100 days. Now let's kick it up to 265 more days, and then ultimately get to the grand vision in terms of execution and thinking as well. And I know we're going to get there 1000%. I know we're going to get there, but ultimately just documenting raw and real and also showing our builds, I think that is ultimately going to be the name of the game. And just having that sheer level of obsession, which is ultimately going to 10x our output in terms of value. And I know that we're going to get there, just ultimately need to build that compounding leverage that we're building today. So it all starts from here and then ultimately snowballs into the compounding leverage that we'll build in a year's time from now. So I'm super excited. I hope you guys are too. If you guys want to connect with me on X, LinkedIn, Instagram, and I will see you guys in the next video.